Hey everybody, and welcome to iCast Guidance. This is our live stream just before we record our weekly podcast. How's it going this morning? It's good to see you.
Good morning.
So we got some interesting stuff to talk about today, which I'm kind of excited to get to the podcast on.
Yeah.
We decided this week, last week we talked about death and dying.
Yes.
Which naturally led us to this. And
today we're going to talk about healing and resurrection.
Healing and resurrection.
How do you counteract the death and dying?
Correct. Last week we decided that we were going to start off our podcast with what happens at the end. Now we're coming back from the end to some degree. Yeah. All right. So I got to say, first of all, in tackling this topic, you brought up something that absolutely floored me because it's something I never looked at before. Now, granted, we're not getting into the whole podcast yet, but the number of ways you can be healed in D&D never occurred to me.
I didn't even think about it either. I started doing a little research for our podcast, for topics and etc. And I searched out there because I started going through essentially the player's handbook. Or I was on, I think, D&D Beyond.
Right.
And I was looking for healing spells. But then I was like, let me just search Google 5e healing spells. I came up with there's got to be... And some of them do include resurrection spells, but there's got to be 30 different spells on this list.
It's unbelievable. But these are spells that I don't think, like the thing that blew my mind was I'm thinking healing word. I'm thinking of cure wounds. I'm thinking of mass cure wounds.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ones? Because it's like, whoa.
I mean, yeah, you've got all the things that you don't think of, like aid. It provides you with healing and extra hit points, depending on what level you cast it at.
Right.
There's things that you don't think about, like Hero's Feast gives you temporary hit points and healing.
Right.
And then there's all kinds of different ones, like Paladin's Auras and Beacon of Hope and stuff like that.
Armor of Agathis.
Armor of Agathis. You don't think about that, but it provides healing. It's a way of healing yourself. There's Vampiric Touch. There's so many different spells.
I like Vampiric Touch.
It kind of blew my mind seeing the variety of spells.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I just think of the standard, cure wounds, all the mass cures.
Right.
Heal. And not think about all the other ones.
Yeah, I mean... We had some good questions during the week, actually, on a couple of the videos that popped in. So one of those things was, about, and I'm kind of straying off the topic here, but I am staying on the topic. But somebody had asked about the notion of building encounters that the party doesn't wipe out in one shot. And this is kind of related, right? Because when we talk about the whole dynamic of what it means to exist inside the world of D&D 5e or any TTRPG, it's sort of like we want to build tension, right? We don't want the party to wipe out the adversaries in one round of combat, and we also want there to be the possibility that the party could die, because those two things combined build the tension of the game. And we could look at storylines and narratives out there in the world of where this happens, like I'm trying to think of a battle in the Lord of the Rings that would be an appropriate battle. That would be like, yes, here's where the storyline's tension was built. And hey, Elias, how's it going? It's good to see you. The final battle in Return of the King, when they're facing off at Minas Tirith, and there's like this sea of this army of orcs and this army of the undead that's sort of helping out Aragorn. In all of these opposing forces, it's like, okay, this isn't going away quickly. Our friends in this storyline could die, and that's where the tension is built. But in the mechanics of D&D, it's sort of like roll for initiative. Nat 20.
It's maximum enemies.
The BBEG is dead.
Yeah.
So it's let's get this let's get this fleshed out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a little bit of that during our death and dying topic. Trying to bring a little more realism into it.
Yeah. And this is the hard part for me. I mean, it's not the hard part. It's the part I desire, and it's the part that I feel like maybe I ask too much in.
I don't think you're asking too much because, I mean, as a player, I guess it really depends on how you want to play. Like, everyone loves combat, but you want to have I want tension in the combat. I get bored if it's way too easy. Like, and as you progress in levels, it does get easier to a point.
Right.
You know?
Right. But as this person in the chat, not in the chat, sorry, in the comments on our video asked, that falls on the DM because you say, I get bored if combat's too easy. Okay. But then what's your job as a player character or even as someone who's playing a player character? Your job is to sort of maximize your character's abilities and use them to the best of your ability, which we've seen some of our players who create these insanely OP characters, right?
Yes.
They're like, I come in and do 96 points of damage, running assassin, sneak attack, critical strike. So it's like, okay, so I know that you are going to be, as my player, you are going to be kicking ass. You want to come in and do it as hard and as heavy as you can. So now it's on me to make sure that doesn't end the battle too quickly, so you are not bored.
And that is fun if that's how your player if that's how your character's built, to just do an insane amount of damage. You're trying to pump those numbers. That's fun. But I guess if you're just like, you know, like the person commented, a party wipes it out in one round. It's like, man, I didn't get to do much.
Right. Right.
So it's like finding that balance and the tension. Because if you wipe the adversary out in one round, one person got hurt maybe?
Right.
Maybe two in your party?
Right.
It's like you got to find the balance between finding that line.
Well, and the other thing is when the party's batteries are fully charged, you're fresh from a long rest, you've got all your spell slots, you've full hit points. That first encounter you come up against is probably not going to be. So I'm talking as a DM, right?
Yeah.
That first encounter is probably going to get wiped out quickly because the party's fresh. As a DM, my job then, I think, is I'd rather throw 5 or 6 medium level encounters at you per day than one between long rests, because I think that commenter who was, asking about this, that might be one solution. It's sort of like, well, rather than giving me, 20 more orcs that are going to create much more in terms of the assassin's attack or the adversary's attack, make more individual encounters that the party doesn't have. Make them use up their hit dice. Make them use their healing saves or their healing spells. Yeah,
when we were looking up a topic, I don't remember what it was, but a few weeks ago we did bring that up, where multiple encounters a day, like a 3 encounter kind of minimum per day, to expend your players' abilities.
Right. And I had read somewhere when we were talking about this, I read that D&D's whole system is designed for 5 encounters a day.
Yeah. Much more than 1.
Right.
Because like 1, it's just like you said, everyone's fresh. You got all your spell slots. You got everything.
This leads me to a thought, though, right? That 5 encounters per long rest period, I think, is based on the dungeon crawl model. Because what you're doing in the dungeon crawl, you're like, you walk down a hall. There's a door on your left. There's a door on your right. Which one do you open? Boom. 5 goblins. Bam. There's a battle. Loot the room. Move on to the next room. There's a bugbear.
Yeah.
So before you know it, you're whittled down. Whereas in a heavy role-playing game, in a heavy role-playing situation where we're really digging into the narrative, hey, One Sonic, how's it going? Nice to see you in the chat this morning. In a heavy role-playing game, we've gone 4 sessions with no combat, much to your complaining, which I get.
Yeah. There's been times.
So this, I think, maybe we're starting to get at the root of where this lives. It's like, is this live or pre-recorded? No, we are live, IP2. So what we do here, just for anybody who's new and coming into this, is we are prepping to record our audio podcast. So what we do is we kind of hang out, we chat, and then we're going to take a quick little momentary break and jump into the audio podcast. Now, when we do that, we typically don't answer comments in the chat at that point, just because we want this to kind of go out as audio and kind of come as a little package. So we're going to be launching that next week, by the way, with 3 episodes. We're going to have the episode on death and dying. We're going to have an episode on armor class and armor, which we've done already as a live stream, but we're going to re-record it. And then we're going to have today's episode on healing and resurrection. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I was just saying, I think we're starting to get at the crux of this problem that commenter sort of brought up. And that is, 1, how do I create an encounter for my players as a DM that's not going to get wiped out in 1 turn, right? 2, how do I keep my players interested in the game combat-wise and feel like there is some kind of urgency or desperation that, number 1,
I agree.
I might die.
Yeah.
So, but maybe that's where it's broken.
I don't know. That comes from the DM.
Well, or it comes from Dungeons and Dragons itself.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying creating a combat that is in that realm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to pull something up for a minute because I want to see there's something that's interesting that I think helps support my claim here.
Okay. All right.
And it's in the player's handbook. And I just want to see, it's under equipment, starting equipment. Let me just go there. There is a table in the 5e. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can find the exact page. It looks like it's been broken up. Okay, so there has been a table in the player's handbook throughout time since the player's handbook was started. Now, if you go all the way back to the 1E player's handbook, it's hard to find any information in that book that's still in 5e.
Okay.
Things have evolved, obviously, over 5 editions of this game.
Well, and it's about to change again.
It is about to change again, which I'm very much looking forward to. But if you look at the... here it is right here. It is the table of other adventuring gear. Okay? So when you go into the player's handbook and you decide, what's my player going to be carrying? You know, am I going to have a backpack? Am I going to be having ball bearings, a bag of 1,000 ball bearings? It's like really interesting, nuanced little objects that can come with your character. This table has been in every edition of the book. Now, why? Like, why did that survive? So here's why. Is because when we had 1E was typical dungeon crawl situations, right? We were not heavy into role play at that time. It just hadn't evolved. D&D was still a wargaming situation, but now we're in the dungeon. And one thing in there that I think is interesting is the 10-foot pole. If you scroll down on this, it says pole, 10 foot, 5 copper pieces, and it weighs 10 pounds. No, sorry. It weighs 7 pounds. Okay, what the hell do you need a 10-foot pole for to carry on you as a character? It doesn't really, I can't see how this adds something to the game. But if you go back to 1E, you would know. And that's because inside of any given hallway, there could be a pit trap, that's going to be deep.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you would walk down the hallway with your 10-foot pole, hitting the ground in front of you to test for traps before you stepped on them.
Okay.
So here that is in here. So, all right, here's where I'm going with this. I know I'm talking a lot. I'll shut up in a second. But the whole point of the whole point of the 10-foot pole was to sort of do that. Now, there is a leftover from 1E that still exists in 5 that is based on the mechanics of a dungeon crawl. Okay? So this proves my point that so much of the mechanics of gameplay, possibly where we're getting screwed up with encounters, is left over from 1E.
Okay.
It's not great proof, but I'm trying to be onto something here. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Hold on a minute. I gotta remove this jackass in our chat. Hold on a second. Is he out? Did I boot him?
I don't know.
Hold on a minute. Remove. You know, hide user on this channel. Bye. Idiot. Oh, here's another one. Wow, we've got some great people out there today. Thanks for coming. We're booting you. Like, who does that? What is wrong? Exactly, Fausti. What is wrong with people? It's like, get out. All right, so let's see. We had some questions in the chat here. So, let's see. What do you guys think D&D is? Do you guys think D&D is racist at all? I've been seeing liberal on Twitter that says it is. You know, that question comes up a lot. Do we want to tackle that one?
I don't know. I mean,
at the end of the day, I would put it this way. If a game system that is this widely played, I think there's going to be variations to that question. I think there's going to be varied answers to that question, right? Yeah. So, for example, like, here's how I'll tackle this question. I always talk about a session 0 in a game as a DM. I want to find out what bothers people. Mm-hmm. Like, where do we go with this game? Where do we not go with this game? You always have that guy in the group that wants to try and seduce the dragon. And some people get upset by the person that wants to seduce the dragon because it's like, I don't want to play that way, right? So it's like, okay, let's feel out the players, what bothers you, what doesn't bother you, right? But then I was actually in a situation once where someone said that violence triggered them. Like, they didn't want to play a game that was inherently violent. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're playing a game where there's combat and swords and blood and okay, maybe I'm not going to describe the death of the enemy by you pulling the entrails out and like throwing them on your face in some kind of weird victory dance. Fine, I won't go over the top. But at some point, where do you decide that the game might not be the right game for you, right? No, I think there's varying degrees to this all over the place. Do I think it's racist? I think in spots, games cross the line and have problems that need to be fixed. Yeah. Is it, are there going to be areas where something is fixed that somebody's like, why the hell do you have to do that? Sure. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I'm trying to be fair to my players. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to be welcoming to my players and have a good time. So I think it's going to be by group. Yeah. Right? It's your table.
Yeah, it's what you make of it.
Right. So it's your table. All right, let's see. Do we got anybody else in here? What is wrong with Pia?
Yeah, no, it's just.
Yeah, so like I said, and this is what's good about this chat right now, right? Is everybody's kind of like on board with, we can ask this question, we can address this question, and at your table, you can solve this problem for your table. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of the game, right? Is we can bring together our own.
I don't see,
I feel like sometimes it does push things further than the dialogue needs to go, but that's that. Anyway, did I make myself, was I clear when I was talking about how the combat mechanics were this idea that you could kill a whole group of monsters in one battle being a leftover from the mechanics of D&D 1E, or is that just like, was I just rambling?
I don't know. I might have gotten a little lost, but then there were the comments popping up, so I don't know.
I'm a white dude. Don't ever claim to be a white supremacist. That's just fucking dumb. I'm gonna put it out there. It's like, I'm glad you love the game, but that's not cool. I'm not on board with that. Okay. If you're gonna ask me if the game is racist, I'm gonna try and give you an answer that's fair. You come in the chat and say you're a white supremacist, get the fuck out. Anyway, what do we want to do next? Do you want me to clarify my point, or do you want me to move on?
I mean, you can if you want.
It doesn't matter.
I don't. I mean, how do we get back on topic about
healing?
healing,
Yeah.
resurrection.
And prepping for today's podcast, because I think that's important. Well, I started out by saying you brought into the conversation a million ways in which you can be healed in this game that I had never, you know, we think about healing, it's like healing potions, healing word.
Yeah.
And now my mind is blanking because I'm sidetracked. But yeah, there's all these other ways. That, to me, is a little bit problematic.
What, having so many options?
I wonder if it is. Is it?
I don't know. I mean, I like the ability that there are options. Different options.
Yeah.
Different ways of healing.
Yeah, but I just don't know if you have 50 ways of healing.
Well,
It's like how many of them can be implemented at once? All right, I've got something that we can put in there. One thing I think, okay, so this goes back to the commenter who asked about how to formulate a group of adversaries that is not going to be killed in one shot. We always think about healing potions in the game as being something we carry just in case something goes bad and, you know, we need something to back us up. Fine. Did you ever consider having your adversaries carry healing potions and use them as a bonus action in the middle of combat to heal them?
That same concept was, this is a little bit of a tangent, but yes, I think the adversary should have healing potions available to them, especially like main ones. Maybe not, you know, your basic level like goblins, but if you're fighting, you know, a boss or a higher level, I don't see why not.
Yeah, and honestly, that could be the one place that healing in the adversary world really can get into the crux of the whole combat. It's sort of like, oh my God, you know, you're getting this guy's bloodied. Like you could tell this guy's going to go down any minute, and then all of a sudden you see
Pops a big potion.
He rips a potion off of his belt, slams it down, and you're like, oh my God, I got to go through all that again. And of course, a DM could abuse that.
Yeah.
But that could be a way to just push this into... Typically, combat ends in 3 rounds, within 3 rounds, right? That's about the average time combat lasts. So imagine that just in terms of the time mechanics in D&D. It's like every battle's going to last less than 18 seconds before somebody wins or loses. Okay, well, maybe that healing potion pushes you one more round, which could be, and that could be the difference between what feels too crushing and just right. Yeah. And I think you can use that at your discretion.
And the little bit of a tangent was when I was looking into our main topic today about healing, resurrection, where they said, you know, how you play resurrection in your games, if the players can essentially infinitely resurrect without any drawbacks or downsides or anything like that, why can't the big bat? Why can't, you know, the boss do the same thing? If it's easy enough for the players to get resurrected, why can't the boss get resurrected?
And I think we've seen this before where, you know, there is a big bad who all of a sudden, you know, raises up something and bam, we're on again. So we got some questions coming up in the chat. Cornstarch Cameron, do you have a trans race in the game? Yeah, I think that's totally, you know, whatever. Again, it's your table. You want to put a trans race into your game. Absolutely do that. You know, make that part of it. And I think we do have that inherently. Doesn't half elf kind of go there or variant human go there? Or you're talking about, I think you're talking about trans just in terms of gender, which I think can be applied to anyone.
Yeah.
So that's totally your table. It's Elias says, do you think there should be limitations on what can be healed when it comes to spells? Hell yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a problem. And I kind of want to talk about this when we get into the podcast part of it. So I don't want to lose my conversational ability on this by saying too much.
Yeah, but I think there should be. I mean, if you lose your arm, a simple healing spell shouldn't be able to bring it back.
Exactly. But then the problem comes up of it's like when you're involved in combat mechanics and the game slows down already, are we going to get so nuanced to say I take the dagger and I attempt to sever his arm, right? And we do say that. We do. We're like, I'm going to run up and stab him in the neck. Fine. And then you roll the die, it hits, and you do damage, but then we never really say, now his neck has a tendon cut in it and he can't look to the left. It's like, I mean, do you guys get that nuanced in your game? Because that can be hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard enough to keep track of, like, conditions. You know, it's like, now you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I forgot. I cut his Achilles tendon. He can't walk on his right leg. That's tough. So when It's Elias says, should there be limitations? Yes. But then how do we implement them?
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I don't know how you would, like you said, you've already got enough to keep track of.
Right. Let's see. We've got some other ones on here. Would you need to see a play? Would you need to see a play to cast a healing spell that has a range? Like the spell has a 60 foot and you think injured player is behind a wall. Oh, yeah, but you can't see them. Good question. I think it's within line of sight.
I think so.
You have to be able to see that player. It's usually,
I'm pretty sure that's how spells work.
Not all of them.
But a healing word spell that has range. That's hard.
That's hard.
That's a topic for discussion, really.
Because
do you need sight in a healing word spell?
Right.
I don't know.
That's a good question. And also, you would assume that if a player was downed or in really bad shape, they're going to try and take cover. So at least they have 3/4 cover. You might not be able to see them because they're hiding behind a column, maybe not a wall, but like they're just out of your line of sight. That's a great question. I don't know.
A couple of people have responded to it. An AoE heal spell.
Yeah, because it's area of effect. Yeah.
It says, but if the spell needs a target, one creature, then you need line of sight. RPG Exile responded to it.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I think that's the answer, right? Area of effect is going to affect the whole area. But targeted creature needs line of sight. That
makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think I think it's also up to the DM.
Agreed.
You could homebrew that.
You could.
Depending.
You could. DM discretion.
Yeah.
And, here's where, look, I'm going to put this out there. I don't know how many of you in the chat are DMs watching this, but it is really hard to play. I'm just going to say really hard to play fair. Because as a DM, if you can let go of your plan or you can let go of your ego, for example, and stuff's not going your way, this was the battle that was supposed to really challenge the party, and they're now wiping your ass with the floor, and you're like, a player now asks a question where I have an area of effect spell, is it going to hit that person behind the wall? And as the DM, you're feeling a little hurt that the battle didn't go the way you wanted to. You're still going to let it happen? You should, right? But again, moving that narrative and that fiction forward is the key thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, healing. Do you remember? Okay, you probably remember this, but I just want to liken this for a minute to video games for a second. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I think about this sometimes. Do you remember going on a massive battle in Diablo 2 and buying like 60 healing potions and just stacking your entire inventory, and in the middle of a battle you've speed keyed that healing potion and you're just you're striking and drinking and striking and drinking. There's just something about that comes into play when I think about this notion of the adversary being powerful. I'm like, I kind of want to see a big bad walk into the room and he's got a belt on and he's got like 18 glass vials strapped to his waist. And he's just able to be like chugging and swinging and chugging and swinging.
There's too much fuel for you right now. Our next combat's going to be interesting.
Well, I think that this conversation is actually going to give me, some power in the next one. I'm going to mess you guys up, I think, in the next one.
Every adversary is now going to have all the healing spells and potions and
This is the answer, people. This is the answer. And I think this is actually really important too, right? Because we often think about larger level adversaries like let's take a dragon or let's take a vampire that has things like lair actions or, they have extra abilities, right? Okay, fine. Give them what you want. Right? Think about the backstory of that potential adversary and say, well, wait a minute, how did they last this long? If this is an adversary that has been sitting in this abandoned house or sitting in this grove in the forest or sitting in this dungeon room somewhere, does this cast of level 3 characters really think they're the ones that are going to kill it? It's been there a long time. Let's give it some ability to keep itself going.
Yeah.
The flee factor for the party should be something that comes into play. Are you going to run? Like, I got a problem with you guys sometimes because it's like the minute I say roll initiative, you're like, kill. There's no negotiation. There's no running. It's just like, oh, this is the time we fight. I want to make you think about
certain players are against running.
Yeah.
We know that.
I want to make you think about it. It's probably time for us to do our podcast.
Sure.
We're getting up on that.
Yeah.
All right. For those of you that are watching, we're going to pause for 3 seconds, and then we're going to launch into what will ultimately be the audio in our podcast. So we probably won't be answering questions in the chat during that time, and it's going to last 20 to 30 minutes. But we're actually going to hone in now on healing, resurrection, and the impact of that on the game. It's still going to seem freeform. We're still going to talk about it in kind of a loose and informal way, but we're just now going to focus on those topics a little less conversationally, I hope. It's Elias. Last comment we're going to take is, do you think you could max out a spell on a singular person throughout a campaign? Obviously, it would be at the DM's discretion. Max out a spell on a single, meaning you'd max out their ability to ever use it. Like, Wish, when you cast Wish, if you ever cast Wish, it has a 33% chance of never being able to be used again. Is that what you mean in that? Like healing. So meaning you as the healer can only use healing so much. Or if the person being healed could only be healed so much. Clarify that for me.
Yeah, I'm confused by that comment. As if it's like a limited amount of uses. Is that what you mean by maxing out?
The latter. Okay, so the uses on a particular person. Because the former, if it had been the former, obviously spell slots, it has its own mechanism built in. But the latter, where the healed person, what do you think of that?
I think that could definitely come into effect on, say, a resurrection limit. And I think we're going to talk about that.
We are going to talk about that.
As far as healing, I don't know.
Well, I would say that, let's go to a real life topic of antibiotics. If you take too many antibiotics, they no longer have any effect on you, right? And actually, they then develop bugs that could be resistant to the antibiotics. So what if Healing Word lost its strength over time?
There's a possibility on that.
It's Elias. I love that as a potential. You know what you're doing? All my players are like, oh my God, you're giving this guy too many ideas. This is a problem for the game.
He tries to make this game difficult in certain ways.
Well, in realistic ways, I hope.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm.
Well, we're trying to bring, feeling into it.
Yeah. All right, let's get the podcast rolling because we got a lot to do today. Yeah, keep them coming. It's Elias because I think I need more of these. All right. We're going to start our podcast recording stream. You guys, thank you for commenting on this. We appreciate most of the comments. I'm not going to say we appreciated all of them, but let's roll with this, okay? And for those of you that are curious, we are going to be dropping this podcast next week. It's called iCast Guidance. Keep an eye out for it. We'll be dropping with 3 episodes. We hope that you follow that podcast and listen to it. And you can join us every Sunday morning live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time while we sort of, flesh out the ideas for that upcoming podcast. So definitely thanks for watching. We're going to stay on live while we do this, though, so you'll be able to hear what we're doing We just won't be responding in the comments. So, All right. You ready to roll on this?
Sure.
All right.
Switch it over.
We'll switch it over. Where can we listen to it? I just keep getting sidetracked. Nice to see a D&D podcast where it's just straight line talk, no gimmicks. Yeah, actually. And honestly, a lot of and I'm going to address these two last things from RPG Exile, and it's Elias because they're important. And I'm not going to name any specific podcasts. But when you want to do something like this, you do your research. So I went on and listened to some of them, and they were just like insanity. Like I was like, nah, I kind of want to just listen to people like focus, and these were like insanity. So I couldn't deal. Where can we listen to it? Well, we're gonna have Podbean host the podcast, and then we're gonna have that push out to Spotify podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so we'll let you know in next week's episode exactly where to click for those links, because I'll know where they're hitting at that time. But at this moment in time, since we haven't uploaded them yet, I don't have the exact information, but I will have that for you. So thanks for asking.
Maybe when you figure that out, you could throw a comment on here.
I could throw the comment on here, and I can also
we'll let you know.
We'll list it
next week.
We'll list it in the YouTube channel too.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Figure it out.
Cool.
Yeah.
You ready?
Sure. Let's talk about healing and resurrection.
Hang on a second. I got to do the intro. But yeah, we're going to get into healing and resurrection. All right. So here comes that 3-second pause. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your D&D podcast where we're going to be talking about various topics around Dungeons & Dragons 5e, other tabletop role-playing games, and who knows, whatever you guys bring to the table. So you can get in touch with us by following us on our YouTube channel and actually watching some of our videos, commenting on those videos, and we will bring those comments into questions that we answer on this show, and maybe even do whole shows around what you're looking for. How's it going?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's going great.
Yeah, it is.
We're having a good morning?
So far, so good.
We're going to have a good chat?
I think we are.
Yeah.
So far. And I think healing and resurrection for a topic today is appropriate given some of the stuff that went down in my life yesterday. I mean, I didn't die, but I almost killed my kid's bird by accident, which was just horrifying.
Maybe there was a little divine intervention there.
There had to be. So, I mean, for those of you that are listening, I have a deck that needs a lot of repair. The bird likes to be in its cage outside. And for a moment, while I had to move something, I put the bird's cage on the railing of the deck, which is up 2 stories. And then I tripped, lost my balance, hit the cage, and it fell the whole way down, smashed into a million pieces, crushing the bird. I panicked, ran down there, grabbed the bird, picked it up. It was injured. It
failed its deck save.
It really failed its deck save in the worst way. I feel so bad. And then I brought the bird in. Thankfully, we had a spare cage. Kind of nursed the bird back to health. And the good news is this morning the bird's on its perch, eating. It's still a little sore in the leg area. Nothing's broken. So there's a perfect example.
There we go.
I cast Healing Word, and it's slow, and they had a long rest. And
little prayer of healing.
Yes, a little prayer of healing.
There
Yes.
you go.
We have a broad topic to cover today.
It's very broad.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot to talk about when it comes to healing, and then especially resurrection.
Right, because we've done this in the past where we decide, let's talk about. We say a topic, and then ultimately it's like, what did we say? Armor and armor class. Okay, those are related. We should talk about those together. That makes sense, right? And then all of a sudden we realize, wow, we've got a lot of material here that could get confusing quick. It's even worse today because healing should be in its own category. Resurrection. Yeah.
But let's group them together. Let's run through it.
Okay, we can do that.
So we were going to start with healing, right?
Right, which, again, is one of those things where you don't realize how many ways there are to heal another player or an adversary until you really dig into it.
Yeah, I started looking up spells for healing and didn't realize how many there were available in the list of spells. It's got to be 20 plus.
Yeah.
Different ways. Different spells that you don't even think of.
Right. And that's, I think, where our listeners would be confused, right?
Yeah. there's always your standard spells as you always go to and think of. And this is where I got confused, and not confused, but surprised in seeing what was out there. You always think of your healing words, your cure wounds, your heals, your masses. But then you've got to think about the little ones. You've got Armor of Agathis. You get hit, you get healed.
Right.
It's, you know, there's different auras. There's Vampiric Touch.
Right.
Give me some of your hit points.
Exactly.
Heal me.
Exactly. Which I love, by the way. That's
there's
a favorite of mine.
so many different spells that actually provide healing that aren't your standard go-to for healing.
Right.
So it was surprising seeing how many different options there were.
And my knee-jerk reaction whenever I see a lot of ways to do a thing, right? So when you've got an assassin rogue with sneak attack and, you know, all of these different ways in which they increase the fold of their damage done, my problematic meter goes off. I'm like, wait a minute, is this too OP? It's sort of like when you take silvery barbs and shield and put them together, and I all of a sudden am having an aneurysm at the table because I'm like, no. But in terms of healing, I think these are all spread out across a variety of different classes.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah, it's not every single one is available to, you know.
So it's modulated.
Yeah, it is. It's I guess, like you said, spread out, regulated between them.
Right.
I mean, really the go-to ones, we mentioned them. You know, your standard healing word, which I think has got to be probably the best healing spell in the game. It's a bonus action.
Yeah.
It's a ranged healing spell.
Right.
As far as 5e goes, damage, I mean, we talked about it, death and dying. You heal the person, they're back up.
Right.
So as far as a healing word, across the field, one of my players are down, you bring them right back up.
Right. Now this is primarily a cleric spell.
Yes. Is healing word available to a druid too, I believe?
It might be.
Oh no. It's all of them. Bard, cleric, druid. This says alchemist. Wonder if they mean artificer, maybe?
They might, but I think the reason I mentioned cleric first is because with a cleric, as a bonus action, healing word is critical because you've got a damage dealer in the cleric. It's not just the traditional spellcaster that's casting this. This is somebody that's able to also deal damage. You want that in the bonus action column.
Yes.
Right? So that's what makes this spell particularly valuable.
Yeah, because the bonus action is kind of... I mean, there are plenty of spells out there, don't get me wrong, in the cleric spell list that use the bonus action. But the ability to still run in, possibly do some damage, and heal a person?
Right. And the die rolls on healing word, let's talk about the die rolls on healing word versus, say, the die rolls on cure wounds.
Yeah. And when you look at it like that, a standard level 1, and healing word's available at level 1, so you get it right away.
Right.
It's a 1d4 plus your ability modifier. So let's just throw it out there. Level 1, you're probably running something 1d4 plus 3.
Two or three.
2 or 3. Let's throw it out there. So on average, you're probably healing 4-5 points versus a cure wounds, which is a touch spell.
Right.
And uses your action.
Right.
A 1d8 plus modifiers. All right. We're doing what? 7, 6, 7, 8.
Those are a little bit above average just in terms of how averages would work out. But yes, I hear you. You're getting a slight bonus, but you're losing the bonus action ability.
Exactly.
And you're also losing the fact that you can do this across the way.
It's the range. It's the range ability of it. And in looking at hit points, as long as you're healing that person, you're never going to be healing them to full.
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah. And there's lots of forums out there that are basically like, just drop cure wounds and go with healing word.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's much stronger.
I've seen it, and personally, I played a cleric. I did that. In the beginning, when I was limited with spell slots, I dropped cure wounds.
Right.
Because of the limitations of it. The, action to cast, the touch ability of it. You're in combat, you just need that quick heal, especially to save people or bring them back up. Healing word's the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I like that. And then, if we're talking about ways in which bonus actions can apply healing, I also love the notion of the healing potion.
Yes. I was gonna bring that up. That's kind of a homebrew. That's how we do it.
Right.
And that's how other players of this system usually do it, is to drink a potion yourself. It's a bonus action.
Right.
The rules are written to consume a potion. It's supposed to be an action spent. But in our home rules, you could feed a potion to someone as an action.
Yes.
Or, if you're going to consume a healing potion yourself, do it as a bonus action.
Right.
And I agree with that.
I think I agree with that also. I would wonder if maybe, and now I'm already, before I even get this out of my mouth, I'm backpedaling this one a little bit.
What is it?
But if I had a greater healing potion, right? We automatically assume, because oftentimes, and this comes from video game terminology, they're larger, right? We assume more of the liquid means more of the healing. However, it could just be a more potent version.
I was just going to say more concentrated,
right?
More potent.
So I was about to say that maybe the larger healing potions would go from bonus action into action, but I'm going to take that back.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking homebrew here.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, maybe if you're thinking something like a supreme healing that does so much healing, maybe that takes a little longer to consume. But again, maybe it's just the clarity of the healing potion.
Right.
Maybe just the strength of it.
Right.
Made better.
I just wouldn't want to double standard myself and say one requires a bonus action, one requires an action. Yeah. But anyway, the point here is that it as a healer, either healing yourself or healing someone else, where do you get the ability to do, I would say, the most efficient version of healing, right? Versus the most potent version of healing.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like, if you can heal someone for 4 or heal someone for 5 and maintain the ability to do damage simultaneously, or heal someone for 8 and then just have to say that ends my turn, I'm going the other way.
Yeah, I agree. It's also very situational. Maybe you want to heal that person and then drink a potion yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
So you got it. It's situational, but I think in most circumstances, the bonus action is probably the more common way to go.
Now, if we're going to talk about healing, I want to get into something here for a minute. I mean, I know we're talking about the bonus action aspect of it, but the thing I have the hardest time with in D&D 5e when it comes to healing is this notion that you're in combat, you get reduced to 1 hit point, let's say 2. You're bloodied, you're going down, you're in rough shape. Or what does it take to get to that point? I once saw this amazing TikTok video where somebody was saying, you as a human being, let's forget role play for a minute. How many hit points do you have? And then he goes on to explain the Louisville Slugger baseball bat, likens that to a club doing bludgeoning damage. How many hits could you take with a Louisville Slugger and survive? And so you immediately start to think, wow, as a human being, I probably only have, I don't know, 8 hit points. You hit me twice with a Louisville Slugger, I'm probably out cold, right? Okay, so if I'm going down like that, and then what? You hit me twice with a Louisville Slugger. Oh, I need a long rest. So I go what? To bed? And I wake up fine?
Yeah.
Completely able to perform all my abilities?
It's a world of magic.
I know. Come on.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
And I'm not throwing, I'm not saying here that Dungeons and Dragons sucks because I can't. That's unrealistic. Okay, fine. It's all unrealistic, which I love. But can I make that mechanic a little bit more believable? Can I make it a little bit more like if you get bloodied, and the condition of bloodied, at least in 4E, 5E bloodied went to just monsters, and 4E bloodied applied to characters. We went over this last time, where 4E bloodied was half your hit points, right? So if I go to half my hit points, if I go to half my life because I took so much damage, don't I need something more? Maybe I need healing, like formal, clerical. I'd go to the hospital, right? Isn't the cleric my emergency room doctor on some level?
Yeah.
Right? Rather than just
I think so.
going to bed? You go to bed with a concussion, sometimes you die. Let's be realistic.
Yeah, it's
a little realistic. I mean, fuck, I'm playing an elf that can cast magic. I'm not really realistic, but I want it to feel realistic. This is my thing. You know that this is my thing in this game.
There's got to be consequence.
Right. I want there to be a sense of that this is more than just a game.
Yeah.
But that's me.
But it's hard. Rules is written. If you're following them, there's hardly anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got that problem. How do you, as a DM at your table, bring into play some kind of mechanic that says, all right, we're going to be a little bit more realistic about this. And also to keep your players on board. Some players are going to be like, no way, man, I'm out. I can't deal with that much detail in my game. I don't want to think about how much a gold piece weighs. I don't want to think about if I have had food and water every day, otherwise I'm dehydrated or exhausted. No, I want to play the game. I want to find things. I want to kill things. That's fine. Your table's your table. This is, I also always say that.
But there are certain players that would like that.
Agreed. As a DM, I would love that.
They would love that.
Yeah.
Got to find that balance.
I want on either a piece of paper that's graphed out or a screen somewhere, a complete spreadsheet matrix of every object every player's holding with the weights and how much they can move. That's the kind of game I want to play. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you guys out there. Like, what level do you play on when it comes to the incremental detail in your game? How much do you feel that matters to the storyline? I mean, remember, theater of the mind has to have a certain fluidity to it in order to feel like it is believable. Like, we are only able to suspend our disbelief for so long and live in this moment and say, I'm a rogue and I am sneaking up on this guy to try and kill him before the rest of the party gets it, whatever the storyline is. Suspension of disbelief cannot stop that scenario to say, oh, wait, I accidentally picked up that marble statue and put it in my bag. I can't, you know what I mean? Now all of a sudden the narrative's challenged. So how do we find the middle ground in all of this? And healing is a big part of this. Healing and resurrection is a big part of this.
I think more so resurrection. I mean, healing, yes, but resurrection, definitely. There's got to be differences to the rules.
All right, so
I think.
What are our primary resurrection tools? What do we got?
I mean, I don't classify. You look at the resurrection spells that are available to you. I don't really classify Revivify in those spells. It is one, you bringing someone back to from death, but it's got to be within a minute. It takes an action. It's instant. It is the defibrillator of the battlefield.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that.
And it does take diamonds. I mean, you have to have 300 gold worth of diamonds. But it's an instant spell,
right?
Instant cast. So that, to me, like I said, defibrillator.
Okay.
Boom, back to life. It's not really resurrection.
Right. They have flatlined, but they haven't passed beyond the earthly bounds.
Yep.
Okay.
The body's still warm.
Yeah, the body's still warm.
Okay. You might be bleeding out.
Right.
You might be missing a limb, which is not going to do anything for that.
And the time limit on Revivify is 1 minute.
1 minute. Within a minute.
Right.
So, soul hasn't left the body yet. You haven't passed beyond that light.
Oh, and the reason you mentioned the soul in this is important because
it is important.
In other resurrection-based spells, the soul has to be willing
to return to the body.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And once we get deeper into that, because I know we're not there yet, but once we get deeper into that, I've got some great stuff I want to talk about.
So, I mean, the other ones, you have Raise Dead, which would be kind of your next step in the line of resurrection. Has to be performed within 10 days. That one costs 500 gold worth of diamonds.
Right.
Like you said, creature soul has to be willing to rejoin the body. What else on that one?
Well, it takes an hour to cast.
That one does take an hour to cast.
So this is a ritual cast.
Yes, it is a ritual. It is a process. It's not an instant type thing. And it does have rules in there for its strenuous coming back. You take a -4 penalty to all attack rolls, and one of those, an ability check, saving throws, that reduces every time you take a long rest.
Right.
So the game, I guess, rules as written, has a little penalty to being brought back to life after a period of time.
Yes.
But is that enough?
Yeah.
Is it enough?
Yeah.
I mean, you were dead. You were fully dead.
Right. We're talking 10 days here.
Yeah. Up to 10 days.
Right. Up to 10 days.
Yeah.
You probably had to have gentle... Wait, does gentle repose have to come into play here?
It doesn't say it has to. Raise Dead just says you return a dead creature you touch to life, provided that it has been dead no longer than 10 days. It also has a stipulation that it can't have died from old age.
Yeah, what's up with that? Like, I mean... Hold on a minute. I want to look up something here. I'm looking up... I want to look up gentle repose, because I think... I should have had this queued. So I could read it. So with gentle repose, I mean, basically the corpse is protected from decay and can't become undead. And the duration on that is 10 days. Okay, so let's just remove the component of can't become undead for a second.
Yep.
We're protecting the body from decay. It would assume to me that Raise Dead and gentle repose are interlinked on some level, almost as if...
I agree.
Because if the body if the body begins to decay, maybe there are different ways in which we can calculate that. So you're in the desert, it's the hot sun, you're breaking down fast.
Yeah. In the spell's description, it does talk about it closes all mortal wounds, but it does not restore missing body parts. If the creature is lacking any body parts or organs internal for its survival, its head, for instance, the spell automatically fails.
Yes.
So if your body has decayed too much,
Right.
that's an aspect that I think you could bring in.
Yeah. So this is where I think gentle repose becomes a non-necessary but bonus kind of helper in this situation. Right.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of pivotal point to bringing that person back.
Agreed.
You can't do it right away. It's got to be within 10 days, but how much of that body was lost
Right.
in those 10 days?
So you know me, I always go to the narrative here. I loved the part about how Revivify was the defibrillator of the game. The soul hasn't left the body, etc., etc. So in Raise Dead, I feel like in Raise Dead, you've got that really, really interesting narrative component of how the body is decaying, if gentle repose has been cast or not, so on and so forth.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think you got to kind of play that as it goes.
Yeah.
Really. Like you said, if you're in the desert, you might have some limited time.
Right.
But it's also, I guess how much the DM wants to change that aspect of it.
Right.
But being resurrected shouldn't be so easy.
Agreed.
I think it's too easy.
Yeah, I agree.
In the rules as written.
So let's move on to the next level.
Okay. Do we want to talk about reincarnate?
Well, I would say that resurrection comes before reincarnate. Would you?
Okay.
Would you agree?
Because it's a whole kind of different.
It's like a sidebar.
It's a sidebar.
Reincarnate's a sidebar.
So resurrection would be
there.
that's your kind of your big one.
Yeah.
It's not the biggest, but that's kind of your big one. Also an hour casting time.
Right.
So it's a ritual type scenario.
Right.
1,000 gold diamonds. It's a pretty hefty diamond. You touch a dead creature that's been dead for no more than a century.
A century.
So, I mean, I guess body parts.
Well,
let me look at
it restores all necessary body parts. So body parts are no longer an issue here. You need to have a chunk of body.
Yes, it restores any missing body parts.
Correct.
So
now gentle repose is out the window. We don't even have to worry about that. We could basically dig up a bone, a femur, from a gravesite, and we're able to resurrect that.
exactly. So, again, I think it's a little lame. It comes with the same stipulations that coming back from death is difficult, and it inhibits a -4 modifier to pretty much everything. Say you've been dead for 100 years.
Let's talk about that for people that don't understand what that is, that
Yes.
-4 modifier.
So it's a -4 penalty on any of your ability checks, attack rolls, saving throws. So, I mean, let's just bring up a really quick topic.
Yeah.
Because rules, if you go below 0 intelligence, don't you die?
Intelligence or constitution?
No, I thought it was intelligence.
You might, because you're brain dead.
Yeah, because I don't know. Maybe that's a topic for another time.
But is the modifier to the rolls you're making on checks and saving throws, or is the modifier to your actual ability score?
No, it's attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks. So it doesn't change your score. It's just your checks.
Rolls.
So okay, so that doesn't have justification here.
Right.
But you're reducing your ability. But I still think if you came back from being dead 80 years,
Yeah.
are you getting right back into it?
Well, no, and I think that -4 isn't quite enough.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm wondering if, let's just say for a minute that, how would we do this? I mean, it's possible to reduce your actual ability scores to, say, 3 and not go below 3, which would impose almost the same penalty, right?
So there is an extra stipulation here for resurrection that if you've been dead for more than a year, it taxes you greatly beyond the -4
Right.
to your attack rolls. Until you finish a long rest, you can't cast spells again, and you have a disadvantage on all attacks, ability checks, and saving throws.
Right.
So they add a little bit in there.
Right. And I think the key thing we got to remember to tell our listeners here is one of the reasons why we debate these rules as written so much is because we're seeing the pitfalls, or we're seeing the weirdness in how it's not quite real.
It's a little light.
Yeah.
It's not real.
Yeah.
We talk about the game, it's all magic, and we just talked about that.
But we want to sort of inject a kind of more realistic gameplay for our listeners so that they're making their game a more, invested, meaningful.
It's meaningful.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you're just automatically brought back to life with pretty much no repercussions. I mean, we talked about this in Death and Dying. But again, I think there should be a little more repercussions.
Yeah.
A little more penalties, maybe.
Yeah.
But figuring them out.
We also have to remember that, just in terms of the realism, when we talk about revivify and raise dead, these are probably things that are going to get cast on party members. When we get to resurrection and true resurrection, which we'll talk about in a second, these are things that are going to get cast on somebody we've not encountered, because we're probably using them on someone that's over 100 years dead, right?
Yeah, probably.
That to me says that the storyline is requiring something deeper. Why would I resurrect someone dead more than 100 years? Well, maybe they had valuable abilities against an adversary. Maybe they had information that I absolutely needed.
Long lost family member.
Correct. And speak with dead wasn't enough, right? I just didn't want to ask 5 questions. I needed to employ this person on some level.
You bring up a good point there. Yeah.
So I think that once we get to the actual usage of these things in the game, the applicability of it is going to obviously vary, right? What's the difference between resurrection and true resurrection?
Okay, so we missed one little thing in resurrection, that it doesn't affect a creature that is undead. So, because we got to bring that in, because in true resurrection, you have a longer timetable.
We're up to 2 centuries now.
Up to 2 centuries. Again, can't have died of old age. They don't want you bringing back, super elderly.
Right.
Again, the soul has to be free and willing to return to the body.
Which I still want to get to.
Yep. That one regains you to all hit points. Everything as far as limbs, organs, everything automatically replaced.
So you could have a shard of a bone.
And if the creature was undead, it is restored to its non-undead form.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I like that. The spell can even provide a new body if the original no longer exists. In that case, you must speak the creature's name, and it automatically appears.
That's amazing. And so here's a couple of things with this. So we were talking about how the soul being willing, et cetera, but there was something else that you said. Not about the dying of old age. It was about
the free and willing. That's the soul.
That's the soul. But there was something else.
Was it the undead aspect?
It was the undead aspect.
Bringing it back to its non-undead form.
So going into the whole world of fiction and narrative, if you have a storyline about how this person became a lich, and then the lich dies for whatever reason, can't get back to the phylactery and dies. Now you cast True Resurrection and you get pre-lich NPC. Okay, awesome. What is the difference between pre-lich and lich that can now sort of become part of your storyline? This could be an amazing sort of turn of events.
This one's expensive. This is end game, 9th level. 25,000 gold point, like diamond.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah,
it's a big one.
It is. And so, I want to go back to the soul being willing to come back. This is the part I love. Okay. So earlier you said Revivify was the defibrillator of the game. Awesome. I immediately asked you before we went on the air, did you ever see Flatliners, the movie Flatliners with Kiefer Sutherland and all that other amazing cast? It's kind of a cheesy movie, but I got to bring it up here because what is it about? Well, it's about these 5 genius medical students that are probably at some Ivy League school, and they're obsessed with death for whatever reason. And one of them decides he wants to be coded. He wants to go flatline and see what's out there. And he knows his fellow medical students will be able to bring him back. So the defibrillator, they're basically casting Revivify on Kiefer Sutherland, right? And so where does Kiefer Sutherland go once he flatlines? And you see it in the film. I'm not going to give away anything about the film. However, as a DM, this is gold material, right? Because we're going to assume that, maybe not with Revivify, but let's move to Raise Dead, because that's the first spell where the soul has to be willing to go back to its body. If my player who's died is sitting at the table, I haven't ostracized them from my table while they're dead. At the moment the party is trying to cast Raise Dead, I'm going out in the hallway or into another room with that player who is dead. And not only am I going to say, I'm not just going to be like, is the soul willing or is the soul? No, I'm going to be like, here's what you're doing right now. Because, okay, whether or not I believe in the afterlife is irrelevant. This is the game, right? You've passed beyond the earthly bounds. You are running through a field of flowers. The air is in your hair. It smells of mint and juniper. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to describe something that, or you are fucking tortured because you lived a horrible life. You are being torn to shreds by a force of whatever, right? I want that person to really have some decision making to do. Is the soul willing or not? And then they're going to answer that in the hallway for me. And then when I come back in, I'm not telling my other players that are trying to cast Raise Dead what's happening there. I am simply going to let them do their thing. And when they turn to me for the decision, I know what the decision is, because that one point, soul willing to return to the body, is so clutch. I love that. I love that.
I agree on that. I like the aspect of that. And I mean, that's all role play and storytelling.
Right.
Really.
Right. I mean, and I have seen some really, really interesting homebrew house rule situations where your death, you're the player in the game, the player character's death has consequences for the player themselves. So for example, in our game, you're out later. I don't want you anymore. I mean, not that severe, obviously, but I say if you die in the game, you die in real life, right? you're probably going to want the soul to come back in that game, unless you hate me and you don't like the way we play. So you're like, no, I'm out of here. See you later. But I have also seen other house rules where if a player loses a character, they go up a level as the player. And now the player gets to apply new boons to the next character they generate. Now, it's not that simple. They're not discarding characters left and right. But you might say, I think it's time to retire this character. The soul is unwilling to go back to the body. I'm going to let it go. Cool. DM comes back into the room. Party has no idea the soul is unwilling to come back. They go through all this trouble. They waste the diamonds. They waste the effort and the time. Body does not come back to life. Done. We take the character sheet. We staple it to the ceiling of the game room. They're done. I think certain house rule situations, death is a force that propels that player to a new place. Of course, this is the idealistic DM trying to think that this is more than a game and everybody wants to be as invested as I am. I hope you do. But I kind of like this mechanic of you coming back or you're not coming back. So,
should we circle back to really quick the reincarnate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gotta do reincarnation.
I just going through this research and looking into this, I didn't even know about this spell.
Right.
Like, honestly, because I've never come across it playing as any of the characters that I have. But reincarnate, one, doesn't use diamonds. It just uses 1,000 gold worth of rare oils.
Right.
So possibly easier to get than diamonds.
Right.
It's a 1-hour ritual, and you touch a dead humanoid or a piece of a dead humanoid. And again, 10 days. Yeah. So this is more like the Raise Dead spell.
Right.
But the spell forms a new adult body for it.
Right.
A random adult body.
Right.
The DM rolls for it, and then the soul enters that body.
Right.
And you regain all of your information, and your racial abilities change, but everything else stays the same.
Right. Right. Which to me is both realistic and not realistic. I mean, none of it's realistic. Let's be clear.
Not, yeah.
But in the sense of the definition, the concept of reincarnation, yes, you'd be in a new body, right? So that makes sense to me. Bringing all your prior knowledge with you does not make sense to me, because we would assume then that reincarnation was the accumulation of every being it was before. That seems like a lot.
All right.
But
I see that, yeah.
But this spell is interesting to me too.
I like the idea. It's just so out there.
I do. I like it too.
Just so out there.
I can find so many weird mechanical flaws with it for how it's, I'm going to put this in quotes, unrealistic. But it's a really, really cool thing, I think, to bring into your game, where all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, if you want to be reincarnated, there's no telling what you're coming back as. You could come back as something you despise, right? And here's something to think about with this. Number one, what if you have consequences in reincarnation for the type of character you were? Were you a lawful good character? Like, did you typically play a character that made the moral choice? Or were you robbing and stealing and doing it all wrong? Then maybe there are two tables you roll on as a DM to decide who they come back as. Maybe you come back as, I'm just going to try, you come back as a beholder, which would be freaking awesome on one level.
Wow.
And grotesque on another, right? I think there's a lot of potential in that spell. A lot.
You could alter that chart.
You could totally alter that chart. Well, this is the thing, people. One of the things I want all of the listeners of this podcast to realize is that that's the point of these discussions, is how do we tune the dial on the rules as written to make these things more believable or enjoyable. I mean, I'm curious about what mechanics you all use out there too, but at the end of the day, it's like, for a long time, I always thought, and we said we were going to bring this up, for a long time, I always thought the wish spell was anything goes. It is the penultimate spell that basically might get used at the very, very end of a very long campaign. But when you read that spell, it's not.
It's limited.
It's got limitations.
It has its limits. Yeah, we reviewed it before talking.
Yeah.
And I was with you. I thought it was the anything goes spell, but it's not.
Right. And I like the fact that within the bounds of the wish spell, all of the other spells we've talked about can happen. Right? Even if you can't cast a spell that's 9th level in wish, because it has to be 8th level or below.
But you could ask for your material components.
You could get that 25,000 gold piece diamond.
Yep.
So, Yeah.
Anyway.
So within this game, healing, resurrection, reincarnation, I think these are absolutely brilliant components that will add to the narrative of the game and can, if you're a thoughtful DM, if you're a thoughtful player, and we've had this happen before, right? When we played that Daggerheart game, and we had our one player who was playing, what was his name again?
EI.
Yep. Right, the environmental interface. He was a clank in the Daggerheart speak. I know I'm outside of Dungeons and Dragons right now. He was a clank, and he was reduced to 0 hit points. He died, and he got to take a choice on his own of how he was going to go. And without even thinking about the mechanics, this was the beautiful part. He just launched into this monologue about how he went down and what happened. It was beautiful. And this is the part where the player's agency and ability to sort of handle death their own way. So complicate things, make them complex, give them, death is difficult, right? Make that believability factor that much more sort of palpable by digging into it. That ritual that needs to be cast. Where are you casting that? Right? We talked about this, not in the podcast so far, but can you cast resurrection anywhere, or should it be in a temple or a grove or, I don't know, near some holy place?
Usually the person that's going to be casting the resurrection is probably linked to a deity of some sorts, or nature, or what have you. So does it need to be in a sanctum of that deity?
Right. And what about the other members of the party? How do they affect the spell? Do you have some really problematic player who maybe hated the person that died and their general energy of disdain maybe dampens the ability rolls somehow and says, they didn't want them to come back and they're in the room. Is that a problem for the resurrection spell? Who knows? I like that too. So there are a lot of ways in which I think you guys can all sort of add some flavor to your game by really considering deeply how these things are written, and then how you can tune that writing to make them a little bit more, interesting to play with. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So this was good.
I like this.
This was good.
I think we had a good discussion on the topic.
Agreed. And I think, down the road, one of the things I'd like to do is we're going to do a podcast episode on our homebrew rules, so that our listeners who hear us kind of talk about all these different options can know how we play the game and either adopt those, criticize those, whatever they want. I'm interested to see how that works. But we appreciate all of you guys listening to us out there. And you can join us every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to actually see the precast of the podcast, where we kind of hang out, chat with our viewers, talk about questions that have been brought up. And then you'll see us launch into recording this. So you can join us for that. You can head over to our YouTube channel at Wither and Bloom Studios and follow us there to see our actual gameplay, other videos that we create. So definitely join us there. And most of all, thanks for listening. We appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
All right. We will see you all next week with another episode of iCast Guidance. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.